Hello again, Attribution enthusiasts. This is episode 15 of Attribution Radio, and I'm your host, Gail Buffington. We've got a great, lively conversation today around the importance of real-time measurement for brands and their performance marketing. Today, you'll hear from Scott Braun, a veteran CMO in the direct-to-consumer space who approaches marketing in a very data-driven, and to steal a phrase from Madon's intro, cerebral way. Scott's perspective on how to think about key tenets of attribution is definitely worth a close listen.
Cerebral Scott Braun here with me. He's one of my clients, and he was, again, gracious with his time to come and share his insights. Scott, if you want to say hi.
Hi, though I've never been introduced as the very cerebral Scott Braun, but I'll take it, I guess. For a Friday afternoon, that's pretty good.
Scott, I know Scott from a last role he was at Drizzly. He was a CMO there, but he's got P&G, Gillette, Vistaprint. Right now, he's at a company called Simply Safe in the electronics category. So he's done a lot of marketing leadership over the years, and he also worked with M Squared on variety of incrementality testing and advanced attribution work. He also has a particular perspective on how he uses different data sets and approaches to triangulate to a decision. I thought the class would really benefit from getting him. Scott, am I introducing you right? Who are you today? How would you describe yourself as a marketer?
That's me. Well, I'll tell you this. My very first all hands meeting with my team at Simply Safe, it's like 90 people. And I get this question and somebody says, when we used to have, years ago, we had a chief marketing officer. And then we had a chief commercial officer, and now you're a chief growth officer. So what's the difference? So I didn't even know how to answer. It's such a great question. I said, you should ask my boss because he's the one that gave me the title. Yes. What am I? I'd say I'm a growth-oriented CMO or a brand-oriented CGO, because CGO is a cool title to have these days, I suppose.
New title nowadays, right?
So yeah, that's how I define myself.
Thank you, sir.
Many years in the past as well.
So would you say that your P&G Gillette experience has really shaped you, or are you more closer to the Drizzly performance marketing? What's the more foundational marketing leadership experience that would say has shaped you phenomenally in the?
That's a great question. I'm kind of split on this one, to be honest. My very first job out of college was working at a big bank doing credit card marketing. So that was database marketing before the internet. I was learning all of these same concepts I work with today, but just doing so, when we were sending out 18 million pieces of paper across the country. I went to Gillette and after business school and loved the brand portion of it, but I found myself for a year leading a direct marketing practice internally because I thought they were missing it. So I suppose I have that in my blood, and then spent too many years at Gillette and P&G to not have a bit of brand in my blood as well. So I really enjoy both, which is why, I'll never take another job that doesn't have both, I suppose.
Cool, that's great. So in all these years of being in marketing, you've seen data, a lot of measurement come in. And now, what's the biggest change you've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, or whatever contemporary marketing is? If for the class, what would you kind of highlight as the things that they should kind of be taken with them in their jobs going into the future?
I think it's the ability for real-time measurement. It really is, and more so even in a DTC world. I think about the advertising we would do at Gillette and P&G, and like we just couldn't get the data that we had today, that I could get today. They're still hampered because they're in a wholesale world, right? So they don't own that end transaction, but like the ability to do advertising, not perfect, but to imperfectly measure our advertising, imperfectly, but 1,000 times more effectively than we could do 20 years ago, has just changed it dramatically. Even for something like TV, like when, if P&G could have measured spike, and if they could have measured spike, I'm sorry, my light's flickering, I don't know why that's the case. They could have measured spike and sales associated with specific TV spots and airings and such like that, like it would have changed the game back then for them. I don't even know what it's like, to be honest, to be at a company like that right now, but I'm sure their game has changed. In the DTC world, it's just, you don't treat any medium as a hope.
Right. It's more like trading. Great sort of a segue into measurement. I think you, in Simply Safe and other places, you've used multiple sources of measurement. what's your POV on it? What works? What doesn't work? How do you think of measurement as a sort of a leader of and steward of a lot of marketing dollars? How do you think about that?
I think a lot of different things work. I don't know that there's one solution. And by the way, you always hear about a new solution. Yesterday, I was on a conference call and somebody mentioned we use this company, and everybody's Googling it and saying, wow, maybe that's a good thing to do. So of course, there's always new companies on this because it's the holy grail. It's always partially solved and it's never fully solved. So we use a whole variety of sources, right? Like actually, it's changed even down from when we worked together at Drizzly too, right? When you were helping us out there was, we had this amazing system set up to measure incrementality over 30 days, and then poof, iOS 14, and everything, like our entire measurement system collapsed, and we had to rethink it. So now, that's ancient history for some at least, but now if I think about the data sources we have, so many data sources, and the key I think is to find out like which ones do you value for what?
Yeah.
Right. So we use MMM. We of course have all sorts of last click tracking. We have a how did you hear about us survey on the site, where this business that I inherited, I've been here, by the way, at Simply Safe for not too far from 2 years, coming up on 2 years, but they didn't even look at last click. They always looked at first click, because related to the conversation y'all were just having when I joined, people don't, spontaneously spend $400 on a home security product. It's not a very impulse buy. So there's a bit of a 30 to 75 day purchase cycle or so. So they looked at first click.
This is a key differentiating factor that CMOs in touch with their data know. The measurement strategies at one brand are not necessarily replicable to every brand. You have to not only align marketing investments with the desired outcomes, but you have to deeply understand your customer and that journey to find where to start. While the core tenets of attribution are consistent, it's not necessarily a lift and shift approach from brand to brand. Nuance is everything.
And then for TV, we use things like iSpot, which has been a really interesting tool that we kind of dabbled in my last job, but we didn't have enough money to make it worth it. Now we have enough money here to get good ROI. So we have 3, 4, 5 different data sources, and then it's figuring out what do you trust for what. Right. So like MMM will tell us direct mail is not good. And I will say, why in the world are we using MMM to judge direct mail? We have a matchback. Like we have a great way to measure incrementality on direct mail. I don't really care what MMM says about direct mail. Right. MMM will tell us that affiliate is terrible. Now, a lot of places will tell you that affiliate's terrible. Except for the fact that like retail me not, that's like, like bottom feeders grabbing your clicks before somebody converts. But in my case here, we have all of these sites. I mean, some people don't like them internally either, but we have all these sites where where they're buying paid search. People can, they're like aggregators across home security. And like best home security systems, they're paying for that term. People come to their site and it's kind of pay to play. So if you want to be one of the quote editorial's best home security searches, you better pay them if you want to be considered the best home security search. And MMM will always tell us this is the second worst thing to do, except for brand search, which is of course always the worst thing to do. Right. So the team, like the day I got here, the team had literally canceled affiliate and said, MMM says it's bad. We told them all to pound sand and we're done with them for 90 days. And I was like, what are you doing? Like the consumer, when we talk to the consumer says, you know what I do? The first thing I'm going to do when I'm going to go buy home security, I go type in top 10, like top home security systems, and they go to one of these external sites. So like MMM might be telling us the data according to the econometric model is telling us it's not a good spend, but it's part of the consumer behavior. Like you ignore that at your own peril. You follow the MMM data, which is good process, right? But you ignore the what's known consumer behavior at your own peril. And now we're back begrudgingly spending, recognizing that the quarter of MMM gives us a report that says affiliates just horrendous, and we have to just say, I know, thank you for your input, but it's not important. So there's different things that are good for.
Yeah, just the class to observe how, as a marketer, I mean, I don't know if some of you guys were in the last class, you saw Paul, who's also in this class. They use data as a way to shape their strategy. They have incoming opinions about what works, and they've done their own sort of analysis based on consumer insights, like how our prior guest talked about it. but they're letting data kind of calibrate their opinion, right? Kind of calibrate and shape their opinion. They don't get like swayed left and right by it, which I find that most veteran marketers are very rooted in their understanding of the space and what media works for their consumers. And then they let kind of media calibrate their understanding, but not kind of blow them away, so to speak. So I've always been sort of fascinated by how you guys operate there. So give us one insight, Scott, that it's counterintuitive insight or insight that's been hard for you to like even process, hey, this, I don't even understand how this could be true.
How it would be true. Oh, actually it's very data related, to be honest, for the same thing around like you get data and then, I guess my mega learning over time on this topic, and I guess I'd consider you an expert, but I don't consider myself an expert on this topic, but my mega learning on this topic is to just keep trying to play devil's advocate. Right. And poke holes in things to understand it better. Right. Like it really is. And from that continual questioning, you get to a better spot. So it's funny, y'all were talking about display when I got on here. I have not had great display experiences in my life. And I didn't in my last job, and they were spending a bunch here, and it was very controversial because it was driving tons of traffic, and then everybody was pointing fingers and saying the site's broken because conversion rate's terrible, and like you had teams going like this. Both teams report to me and they're both going like this at the other person's fault. So finally the team buying media, maybe 14 weeks ago or so, decided, oh my gosh, we got a consultant on the outside. He looked at our display program and he feels like there's tons of fraud, and we're just turning it off. We're just turning it off right now, and then we're gonna do a really smart thing to build it back. And then do something that will be smaller, but will be, we think, much more reliable, right? Less fraudulent. So they turned that off, and about a week and a half later, we measure our TV response through iSpot. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with iSpot, 50 million panel household, pixel-based. We can see response to our TV advertising from that. Also really not perfect, but like very good at the same time. So the team turns off programmatic, and 2 weeks later they come back and they say, oh my gosh, something's happened to our TV buys. Like our performance is terrible on TV. And we're like, what? And we were it was a panic for 24 hours of what's going on. And on TV via iSpot, we measure a few different things. We measure traffic in 2 hours. We measure leads. Somebody was asking before around like interim variables, between traffic and a sale. So we measure leads, which we measure 1 days and 7 days. And then we measure like people that add to cart. And then ultimately we measure conversion as well from iSpot. A whole bunch of different things that we think are useful for different reasons. Anyway, traffic fell off a cliff right after we stopped programmatic. And we wondered what had happened. Nothing changed with our TV buys. And what we realized was that iSpot was just picking up all of this, maybe fake, I'm not quite sure, traffic on our site. So it was looking like traffic fell off a cliff because iSpot's not showing the traffic only of people that saw the ads. They're just showing anybody that trips their pixel. Right, and that's it. Right. So that threw us into a panic for a moment until we looked at leads, and we saw leads were unchanged. Right. So like there was all of a sudden, I don't think the team had ever had for a year and a half, they'd been running programmatic and iSpot. They never had any idea that these two things were having such like impact on each other. And to be honest, when I got to the company, they were using iSpot to measure traffic impact of ads. And now in retrospect, that was so wrong. So we ended up moving, we moved well before this, thank goodness. We moved like a couple months after I was here because I was like, I don't know if traffic is the end game here, guys. Right. We moved to measuring leads and impact on leads, but it was just such an interesting thing. We changed one thing over here on a digital channel, and our TV buy looked horrible, but our TV buy on leads looked totally fine. And we said, okay, good. Amazing. Now we understand that traffic is we had already been leaning away from looking at traffic. Now we said, don't even look at iSpot traffic because it's getting clouded by every other marketing tactic we have.
It's funny. I'm not sure, having heard you and other CMOs in class, how many of these folks want to be CMOs growing up? They don't want to be CMOs. It seems like a really hazardous job, right? There are so many things happening. You're sitting on top of so many things you don't fully understand. Yeah. You're trying to keep growing the company while keeping your job. It just seems a ridiculously tough job.
I think this is the fun stuff.
Yeah, well,
the fun stuff is, the fun stuff is all the different channels you have at your disposal. Yeah. Trying to understand what works quantitatively, but realistically, you have to understand the consumer at the end of the day as well, and try and incorporate consumer insights. That affiliate point is the perfect point. Like team literally was walking right off a cliff based on the data, and it was because they were like narrowly looking at numbers, and numbers are really important. And then you need to know, like I said, you always need to play devil's advocate and say, why would it be saying this? Right. And is it actually right? And should I believe it? Right. And maybe you need to also, of course, Madan, which I think you'd espouse, is usually don't run right off the cliff, but maybe test your way off the cliff. I don't know if that's really possible to test your way off a cliff, but to test your way into something new and big and an important decision, as opposed to, seeing the data and just flipping 180 degrees.
Who do you respect in the space? Other CMOs are solving attribution well, measurement well. Is there somebody you've seen do this job really well?
Who do I respect in the space? Well, I have a really recent example, to be honest, because fortunate enough, I don't even know how, somehow in my Drizzly days, I got somebody reached out to me and had me join this CMO group. And we get together, I don't know, it's some VC firm, got a bunch of us together, and we all chat on topics of the day. And we had our best session yesterday, which was or 2 days ago, which was from the CMO of Indeed.
Okay, cool.
And it was, I think they have $1 billion in advertising, she said, or so globally. So, the title of the topic was, how do you distribute $1 billion of advertising or something like that? And I found it was,
$1 billion of advertising.
I mean, she's this incredibly accomplished, really smart woman, and also very down to earth, and also understood that there's like just so many myths to punch through on this stuff. And I found, for the, and very also not, even though I could tell they really had their stuff together, not afraid to say where they didn't. Also, so I guess I respect them as a company, but I hadn't known her, and I'm reaching out to her to get to know her better now, because she was great. The funniest thing that came up on this was this. I don't know I hope I don't offend anybody on this call. I'm probably not going to offend anybody on this, but I'll throw it out there. You can tell me later. There was this universal, she mentioned it, and there was this universal cheering. Basically, we all laughed at the fact of companies believing that organic social is a huge idea to grow your business.
Okay.
And we all talked about how much our design teams and our brand teams, how much effort they want to put into organic social, and just how misguided that is in the world of actually doing something for your business.
Right. Makes sense.
And she talked about that, and we all just were like, yeah, of course. I mean, it's like a constant thing. Here's the next innovative thing that we're going to do in organic social that nobody's going to see.
That's right.
So it was just such an interesting insight to have her admit that for such a big, successful company, and everybody's saying, oh yes, of course, it's been like maybe 10 years ago that was a big idea.
It was a big deal. You don't get distributed.
I'm just going to jump in and say that something that really resonated with me, Scott, was when you talked about, this testing method is showing, really bad results for this channel, so this channel must be bad. It's sort of like we think very kind of black and white, and it's sort of, there's secret option C, which is like, maybe this isn't the right testing option to measure that.
Exactly.
And so, I think that just goes back to something we talk a lot in this class about, which is there's so many different tests. None of them work for everything, and sometimes you need more than one. Sometimes you need one over the other, and it's important to not get kind of pigeonholed into the mindset of this must be the answer.
Yeah. And to challenge us to always to take another whack at maybe triangulating and getting more data, right? Like we have a couple different ways to measure TV, and then Madan helped us to set up some of these test and control markets. And we said, maybe this will be the one that gives us the third data point that tells us, like, is it somewhere in between the other two that we have, or what? And it was kind of instructive in that manner too. So it's technology keeps changing, and you have to see what's new and out there, and that might help you measure better. That can, sometimes confirming is a great thing, by the way. Like when you get another data point, we did this, like the business when I was here had almost no 15s at all, and was all 30s on TV. And then they were starting to use MMM, and they got insights from MMM that said, yeah, it looks like it's actually more efficient, less effective, right, per spot, but more efficient because the cost is half to do 15. And then we started looking at iSpot and they got the same data. And for a little while we were getting MTA and we were getting the same data. And it's like, I think we're confident now. We have 3 different data sources all telling us that 15s are dramatically more ROI efficient. I think we can make that call now. So it's not even a terrible thing to get the same data, but then sometimes you have to scratch your head when you get different data. Maybe not as easy an answer when you do that, but yeah.
Scott, how has your time as a brand manager influenced your way of thinking about marketing? And I know there's many different ways to kind of move up to your position as a CMO, but I noticed that was kind of how you did it. So how would you compare your process versus people from other backgrounds?
Gosh, there's so many different, it's a good question. There's so many different successful people that are CMOs that came up. Somebody came up through product. Somebody came up in an agency just like as a great brand person. Somebody else like grew up as a true growth person doing performance media, something like that. So there's certainly not one size fits all, right? There's so many different paths to get there. I think like for me personally, I talked about like I'm pretty split, really, in terms of my right and left side of my brain, and I've sort of popped back and forth on these different roles that tugged at each side of my brain. So I always had that balance. I think, first of all, I think that's what the most successful CMOs do have. By the way, even if you came up, like you're a data scientist and you come up, if you might be amazing. I could never do something like that, but you might be amazing at data science, but you still have that like good balance on both sides of your brain to be able to impact the CMO, right? The data and the intuition and the learning over time. For me, from a brand, it was just the reminder not to get lost in the data. Right. And to always think insight. And maybe it's that like, it's a curiosity. It's a curiosity that you have. And I remember reading years ago, somebody, I wish I remember who it was, but I remember reading in some magazine or something, some guy at an agency saying his clients wouldn't know an insight if it hit him in the head now. Like all his clients know is like, just look at the data, like just tell me what the search data says, it's just about the data. And it's just not just about the data. And I think being a brand manager, would I really start at Gillette and P&G again? I have no idea. It's hard to imagine because I never want to work at a company that big again, to be totally honest. But the training was great, and the training was around, really deeply understanding your consumer as much as you can, and what makes them tick. Because even now, I just had a meeting an hour and a half ago with my product team, and we're going through all the testing that they're doing on the site, and we're going through the testing and the numbers, but simultaneously we're thinking through like, why do we think this turned out like this? Right. Like what was actually in the consumer's head that actually made them choose the variant over the control, so that we can be smarter for the next time. Because if we don't like increase that intuition, that consumer understanding, we're not any smarter for the next time. All we did was have a successful A/B test. So I think it's that curiosity in the consumer was what influenced me the most.
I don't know if a lot of you guys who are in this space are trying to interpret and storytell data and insights. You can see how Scott, who is one of the storied CMOs in Boston, still struggling with it. To this day, he's still trying to understand consumer insight. I don't think we're ever going to fully figure it out. But I know a lot of us, when we get a read and try to interpret it and storytell, we struggle with it. Well, you can see that's part for the course in the space.
But that's the fun part. I always felt like when people used to ask me why I like marketing, I felt like it was a puzzle, trying to put it together. And you've got your consumer, and how do you understand that as best you can? And you've got what your company's good at, or your brand's good at. You've got your competitors, and it's this like puzzle of trying to match it all together. And there's some magic in there to make something grow. And it's that's the goal.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Scott.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Attribution is trying to put together a puzzle, but there's always some magic involved. That's our episode for today. Thanks for listening to Attribution Radio. I'm Gail Buffington, signing off.